Hi everyone, welcome to episode 98 of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I hope you are doing well. On the show today, we're discussing all things the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory. Now, this is a topic that I have been wanting to have on the podcast for a long time now. I was looking for someone who would be able to really bring in the neuroscience as well as the yoga and the Ayurveda aspects of it. And we're chatting with Mel Singh on the show today. Mel is a trained kinesiologist and exercise physiologist, and she has a specialization in neurophysiology. She's also a mindfulness meditation teacher and yoga and Ayurvedic practitioner and counselor. And her work basically weaves together ancient wisdoms of yoga and Ayurveda along with modern science so she can help her clients deal with stress, anxiety, and really heal the nervous system holistically. She and her husband, Vikramjeet Singh, who has been on the podcast many times over, help provide counseling, coaching, and continuing education to yoga teachers through their online offerings and programs. And Mel and I talk about everything from the basics. What is the vagus nerve? Where is it located in the body? How does the vagus nerve impact our life in general? How to care for this? How do we even recognize if it's out of balance? What is the measure we use to understand this? How do we work with the vagus nerve in yoga? What are the actionable tools that we can use? And why this is so significantly tied with the guna system in Ayurveda, and how yogis knew all of this, and how modern science is just catching up. And it's a fascinating conversation. The topic itself sounds very serious, the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory, but it's actually truly fascinating to see how this is at play in every moment in our lives. I hope you find this conversation valuable. In fact, I'm sure you will find this conversation valuable. You can find everything that we talk about in our show notes at letstalk.yoga/listen. I will link to Mel and all her work there as well. And just a quick note before we head into today's conversation, the only way I can continue to provide free yoga content and education like this is if you leave us a little review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. I've said this before, that it's your support that really has helped us get to almost 100 episodes, and it is your continued support that will help us to get to beyond 100 episodes. So if you have a moment and you really enjoy and find value, I know a lot of you message me on Instagram, which I so deeply appreciate. I see every single message. I may not be able to write back on time, but I do see every single message that comes in. And I really appreciate how you share the impact that this podcast is creating in your life. And if you could take a moment to leave us a review as a 100th episode gift, I would be really, really humbled. Okay. As always, thank you so much for listening. Here's my conversation with Mel. I'll see you on the other side. Hi, my name is Arundhati, and you're listening to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I'm an ex-Bollywood dancer turned yoga and wellness educator. I've built a 6-figure business as an immigrant, woman of color yoga teacher with no business background, no handstands, pure instinct, and the free information found on Google. If you love doing yoga and you dream of teaching it someday, this podcast is for you. We go over everything from doing and teaching yoga to scaling a small business, living a modern yoga lifestyle, and so much more. You'll find interesting, fun, raw conversations along with some tips, tricks, strategies, and insights in this podcast. So grab your cup of chai and let's jump in. Hi, Mel. Welcome to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you are here. As we were talking a moment ago, I have been wanting to speak about just the vagus nerve on the podcast for so long. And I don't know why I didn't ask Vikram sooner, because this topic has been on my bucket list for so long. I'm glad you are here to give the listeners clarity on what the vagus nerve is all about. It seems to be not trending, that's not the right word, but it seems to be very visible, or maybe because I'm looking for this type of content of late, it's really visible. And I think it's something that a lot of yoga practitioners could use some clarity on, myself included. So I'm hoping you'll be able to put things into perspective for us today.
Yes, for sure. I will absolutely do my best. Absolutely.
So, where do you want to start? Should we just start right at the basics? What is the vagus nerve and where is it located on the human body? And why should we pay attention to this nerve?
hmm Yes, I think that we're even start just like before that, I was thinking to like just giving everyone like almost a Coles Notes version, a brief like intro to the nervous system to really kind of like kick things off. Because I think that, of course, the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory, all of these things like exist within the context of our nervous system. So I will keep it very simple because, as you know, as we were discussing, this can be like a rabbit hole. It can be really, really deep. But I want to give people just just this context of the nervous system. And I think that when I think about, trying to disseminate the wisdom of the nervous system in like the sort of most simple way, what it comes down to for me are like two main things that we want to think about. So the first thing that I always say to people is we need to really understand that we experience and we process the entire world and our entire experience of reality through the nervous system. And so what this looks like in a really, really simple way is that what your nervous system is basically doing all day, every day is we're taking in stimulus, right? We're taking in stimulus, we're processing that stimulus in the brain. And then based on that information, we're creating a level of output. Okay. And there are so many different ways we take in stimulus. Of course, we have our sense organs or gyanendriyas, right? Where we're taking in information from the world around us. And then we also have this stimulus and all of this, information that we're getting from our internal organs, like from our body. And so this is where the vagus nerve really comes in, right? Because we have this felt sense and it is so connected to our felt sense or our neuroception. Okay. And so when we talk about polyvagal theory and the nervous system, this is really what we're going to be going into a little bit more. So I think the most important thing to recognize is, like I said, we're constantly taking in information from the world around us and within us. We're processing it in our brain, and then we're creating some level of output or expression. So like acting in the world. And the second thing that's going to become very important in this conversation is that to understand that our brain and which is like our central processing system, like the CEO of our body, it's got one job, and that job is to keep you alive. So on a very primal level, as we're going through life and we're taking in stimulus and we're processing that stimulus, your brain is literally detecting threat, no threat. It's putting things into two different buckets. Like, is this thing that I'm going to do, is this person, is this experience, is this going to kill me? Or am I going to be safe? And the other thing to really get about this is that a lot of this detection is happening like below our level of consciousness. It's happening within our autonomic nervous system. So this is, again, where the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory operates is largely within the autonomic nervous system, the part of our nervous system that operates automatically or autonomically, right? Without us having to really, really think about this, right? And so generally speaking, this is helpful, right? We need our autonomic nervous system because we don't want to have to think about every breath we take or consciously regulating the beating of our heart or our digestion. Like that would be exhausting. But in the context of like threat and danger, what that also means is that a lot of our responses can be really hardwired and they happen automatically. And so that kind of looks, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, of course, like throughout the podcast, but this kind of looks generally two ways. And people have probably heard about like the sympathetic and the parasympathetic aspects of the nervous system. So our sympathetic being like that fight or flight response. And then our parasympathetic, which is that, it can be like this calming rest and digest, but it can also be, as we'll see, this more like intense sort of shutdown response where we've experienced something and we're just totally like withdrawn from whatever it is. And so again, as we kind of go through this, what we'll see inside of the, polyvagal theory is that when we experience this sort of like threat response and this chronic stress, or if we experience trauma, whether it's acute or chronic, and we have these unsafe inputs over time, it can actually change the functioning of our autonomic nervous system. And we can get stuck in these different modes. And so the polyvagal theory really kind of goes deeper into helping us to understand these responses. And it, along with Ayurveda and yoga, it actually gives us a beautiful framework for resiliency and for teaching us how to move out of those states and back into safety or back into like a more sattvic way of being.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm glad you gave us that overview because, we all take it for granted that, we know what our nervous system does. But the truth is most people have forgotten what the nervous system really does on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute functioning level and combine that with all our stressors, it can really be impactful.
Mhm.
So let's turn the focus to yoga and Ayurveda, right? Why is this so significant? I mean, the question itself seems simplistic, but why do we as yoga practitioners, yoga teachers, Ayurveda practitioners, why is this nerve so significant in what we do?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think like for both practitioners and teachers, and I can kind of speak to both like separately, but together, I think that something that was really ingrained for me when I was training as a kinesiologist and I was working with other humans is like when you're working with another human being, you're actually working with their nervous system, right? And so that was a really big context shift was like, oh my God, I'm working with this other person's neurology. So as a teacher, when you're moving someone, whether it's through asana or meditation or through pranayama, you are affecting their nervous system and you're affecting their neurology, right? And so as teachers, to be able to have this understanding of the nervous system, of the vagus nerve and how it functions and what it does and all of this, this can really help us to make sure that what we're teaching and the way that we're teaching is really going to be like effective for our students, that it's going to be safe for our students. And as we'll kind of go into a little bit more deeply, like we'll see that there are different states of the nervous system. And based on where a client or a student is, based on that, state of the nervous system, we can really be intentional about the asana, the pranayama, the meditation, the different things that we're recommending to them to move them out of that state and into a more safe state. But it starts with knowing like, where is this client's or student's nervous system right now? And what are the ways that I can help to create balance and move them out of it? So as teachers, I think it's so important in that lens. I think it's super important from like a trauma-informed lens. We don't know what people have been through in our classes. So to be able to have this wisdom and to be able to hold space for people whose nervous systems may be who knows where, right? Because people don't always present outwardly, that they're in a, dorsal vagal state. You might not be able to see it. So I think it's important to be aware in that lens. And for practitioners, I think it's so empowering to have this knowledge and to have this understanding and to know your body, right? And to understand what's happening in your body, to understand your own nervous system. Because a lot of what we'll talk about when we go deeper into like, what is the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory is this idea of neuroception, right? The ability to detect what's happening in my body. What are the cues from my body? Am I stressed? Am I, in a more sympathetic state? Am I in a more parasympathetic state? Like when we can get that for ourselves. And for me, like this was huge. When I started to see and be able to identify, oh, I'm in this nervous system state. Okay, well, I know what the state of my nervous system is. Cool. I have all of these tools that I know are going to help get me out of that state and into safety. That was like the most empowering thing for me ever, because all of a sudden it made me empowered in my own healing journey. I didn't have to always feel dependent on someone else. Of course, yes, we want teachers and guidance, and that's so helpful and it's so beautiful to be in community, but it's also very helpful to be able to have this level of like self-healing for ourselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to go back to something you just mentioned a moment ago, the states of the nervous system. Can you talk to us about what are these different states?
Yes, for sure. So I'll sort of also go into like the basics of like what is the polyvagal theory inside of this, because this will help to sort of set the stage.
Sure.
So the cool thing is that I guess prior to this idea of the polyvagal theory being introduced is there was this idea that like you're either stressed or you're not stressed. Like you're either classically like stressed, overwhelmed, like anxious, like that kind of
very black and white.
Yes, it was very black and white. And then it was either like you're stressed or you're calm.
Mm-hmm.
But what Stephen Porges kind of saw was like, wait a minute, there's more of a gray area and there's these different states of the nervous system. And so what it really suggests is that there's these three distinct neural platforms that are linked to how we function and how we operate, not only inside of like stressful situations, but within our lives in general. And not only like in our physical body, but like how we communicate with other people. And again, this is important because they kind of only thought that there were two, like it was like on or off. But this just helped to give a little bit more clarity to this kind of like black and white issue. And again, this is going to be really cool when we go into Ayurveda and yoga and the gunas. But essentially, these three states are this idea of the ventral vagal state. So this is the state of the nervous system that ideally we're striving for, where we feel safe, we feel social, we want to, talk to people, we want to socialize, we feel healthy, we feel good. This is our ventral vagal state. And in this state, I would say this is like a state of resilience, because it's not like we're in a ventral vagal state and like nothing stressful happens to us. It means we're in a resilient state where if something stressful happens, we can handle it and we can bounce back really well. And this is like what we're aiming for.
Could you give me an example
of a ventral vagal state? Yes. Okay. So maybe like right now, for example, I am in a ventral vagal state, having like a lovely conversation with you, right? Where I feel safe to share about this wisdom. I feel safe to connect. We had like a lovely conversation prior to this, call where we created, honestly, unconsciously, possibly like this level of connection between you and I, right? Where like, if we go even deeper and when we talk about the vagus nerve and the innervations and all of that, sometimes what we're detecting in other people when it comes to safety is like someone's facial expressions or their cues or the tone of their voice, right? So like we were engaging, before we were chatting, you were smiling, your voice is pleasant and like lovely. And that creates a space of safety between you and I, where I feel safe to share this wisdom in a really open way
and engage.
Engage, right? And this we could even say for like a yoga teacher, right? When you're teaching in a studio,
so true,
right? And you're like, someone comes to the front desk and they're new. Oh my God, think about like a new person coming to a yoga studio and they're nervous, right? They haven't come to a yoga studio before. If the person that is greeting them is like smiling and welcoming and their voice is happy, they're going to feel a sense of safety and connection.
It's a game changer, yeah.
It's a game changer, right? And it's so subtle. We don't even know we're doing it, but it creates a level of safety and connection versus if that person maybe, which we all get in bad moods, we totally get, but maybe that person at front desk is in a bad mood and they're frowning and they look annoyed. Maybe that person then, they don't feel safe. They feel,
You sense it.
You sense it, right? And that's actually your nervous system is sensing. We're co-regulating with another human being. And we're sensing, is this person or is this space safe or is it not safe? And so picking up on someone's, like physical cues, the vagus nerve actually regulates the way that you look. So when you're happy, you actually naturally smile. If you're angry, you kind of, your face makes different, musculature. The vagus nerve is responsible for a lot of that. And some of the cranial nerves are responsible for a lot of that. And the state of the vagus nerve, whether it's healthy and toned and resilient, is going to influence that, right? And that's going to impact the people who are around you as well. So there's like a level of co-regulation that sort of happens there.
Thank you. I just asked for the example because I was like, the listeners would benefit with example.
Yeah.
Sorry, the next one. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. I think the example is great. And then it also helps for people, especially many of the listeners, maybe yoga teachers or practitioners or people who feel that, maybe fear of going into a yoga studio for the first time. I think it might be like a helpful resonating example. So yeah, we've got our ventral vagal. That's our safe and social. We feel safe to be, social and seen and engage with others. Then we have our sympathetic fight or flight state. So this is like the classic stress response where we feel defensive. So again, I'm going to use that example of you're coming into the yoga studio. Maybe you see someone and they're like, they seem like disinterested. Maybe what's right there for someone is like, I got to get out of here. I just got to go. I actually don't want to be here. Or they feel like they want to kind of give it back to that person, right? Maybe be like a little sassy or a little, rude.
Absolutely.
Right? You don't necessarily want to connect with that person. So a lot of the polyvagal theory is about connection, connecting with others, connecting with ourselves. So that's sort of like the sympathetic fight or flight. There's of course like implications in our day-to-day life too, where we just feel stressed and we're overwhelmed and there's cortisol. But in the context of like polyvagal theory, it really is with respect to like social connection. And then the final state is the dorsal vagal response. And this is more associated with like shut down, dissociation, don't want to engage. An example of this would be like, maybe, you don't want to really talk to anyone. You want to withdraw. You don't want to make eye contact. You feel like you kind of just want to like make yourself small and not seen. And I think the other interesting thing to understand about like these states is they kind of exist in a spectrum, right? So we can all like resonate with being like really stressed and really overwhelmed and like, and just like kind of minorly stressed and overwhelmed. And we can also resonate with being like, having those moments of maybe dorsal vagal where we're like, I just want to be alone. Like, I don't want to connect with anyone. But the extreme end of that is like, really like, I don't want to move. I don't want to get out of bed, like very sort of intense, like depression presenting almost, right? So it can be a spectrum as well.
This brings a lot of clarity. So where is the nerve on our body, like the vagus nerve? Where is it located and what are its main functions? I mean, you mentioned it on and off, but where is it in the body and what is it specifically responsible to regulate?
Yes. Such a good question. The interesting thing is it regulates a lot of different things. It has a lot of different jobs. And I feel like it's a super cool nerve. So I'm very excited to nerd out with you on this. But so the vagus nerve is
Actually, Mel, can I interrupt you for a moment? I just realized I wanted to get to one more question before we get here.
Yes, for sure.
What are the different types of nerves? Let's start there and then we'll go into the vagus nerve itself.
For sure. So there would be three main types of nerves. We've got spinal nerves, cranial nerves, and we've got enteric nerves. And really just the main difference between those is like, where do they originate and what do they do? So cranial nerves, which the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve, originate in the brain and in the brainstem. Spinal nerves, as their name suggests, originate in the spinal column. And then enteric nerves, you actually have an entire system of nerves within your gut and in your GI tract. And so those are what the enteric nerves are responsible for.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. But yes, so the vagus nerve, as I said, it is a cranial nerve. So it's our 10th cranial nerve. And so this actually originates in the brainstem. And it's actually the longest nerve in the entire body. And it's called the vagus nerve from the word vagabond. And that means to wander. So it literally wanders from your brainstem. It has innervations, like I said, within the face, within the throat, within the chest, the heart, the liver, the lungs, the diaphragm, like down into your GI tract. It literally like wanders through your entire body and it sends and receives messages. So some nerves will only like take information from the brain and send it out. Some will only take information from the body and send it up. But your vagus nerve, it does both. So it has a bidirectional communication. So that means that it's taking information from the brain. It's like sending it to the heart, liver, lungs, all of the things. And then it's also taking information from those organs and bringing it back up to the brain. And this is a huge amount of like what we call that neuroception. It's helping us to sense what is happening in my body. Am I safe? Am I not safe? How's my digestion going? How's my stomach? Like it's giving us a lot of feedback about that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When we look at this from the yoga and Ayurveda perspective, right? And if we take just the average person into account, where are we in terms of status of our vagus nerve, for lack of a better word? Are we overstimulated? Is the vagus nerve understimulated? Essentially, what is our natural state of the vagus nerve is kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think that a lot of us these days are very overstimulated from a general like nervous system perspective. So we are living in a society and in a world where, number one, we have more stimulus than ever. Like our jnanendriyas are taking in more visual stimulus, auditory stimulus than ever before. And that's a lot for like the brain and the mind to like digest and assimilate. So I think that a lot of us are in a chronic sympathetic state. And yet we also live in a society that thinks that like more is better. So even in the context of like asana, we're like, all right, I'm going to go do this power flow. So we're in this chronic sympathetic state. We're going and we're doing asana, and we think maybe that all yoga is somehow calming and relaxing, even if it's a power flow because the name yoga is there. And then we're doing these like advanced, challenging asanas that are actually further stimulating our nervous system and creating more and more of that like sympathetic tone within the vagus nerve, when that's not actually what we need. What most of us probably need more of is a little bit more of that parasympathetic, calming, rest and digest, like a little more yin yoga in our life, a little more restorative yoga in our life. I think we need to be a little bit slower. I think a lot of us need to put the brakes on a little bit more. So if we think of like the sympathetic versus parasympathetic, it was always taught to me like the sympathetic nervous system is like the gas, foot on the gas, we're moving forward. Parasympathetic is like the brakes. I think we need to be putting more emphasis on the brakes than constantly moving forward. So I think that it's like the vagus nerve is just getting a lot of sympathetic stimulation. And I think we just need to bring in a little bit more like ventral vagal or calming sattvic stimulus versus this rajasic, very active sort of sympathetic nature.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I also feel like most people, and me included, we just don't know how to slow down.
Yes.
Right? We just, and I see it, I'm sure you see it too with clients and students. They can't sit still, lie in shavasana. They just feel like it is such an alien state to allow their bodies to just be like that.
Yeah.
So, and you gave me a perfect segue. I do want to talk about the gunas, okay, in this conversation, because I feel like it's an integral part of understanding this a little more deeply. Can you help us understand how the gunas interact with the vagus nerve?
Yes. So this was something, as I said to you before, that was like the most exciting part for me about learning about the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory, when I saw how almost seamlessly it interfaced with the gunas and the intersection of yoga and Ayurveda. Like it like excited me on next level. So I think the cool thing to sort of understand is, and because I know that we were talking before about like yoga and Ayurveda, like what does yoga and Ayurveda say about the vagus nerve? And I think that they have almost like a different language to describe what has essentially been outlined in the polyvagal theory. And interestingly, it's a concept that they've always understood, right? That yoga and Ayurveda have understood for thousands and thousands of years. And really, like it comes down to the deep understanding that yoga and Ayurveda have about this mind-body connection, because that's ultimately a lot of what the polyvagal theory is highlighting, right? So I'll sort of outline it here. And if people aren't super familiar with the gunas, I'll provide like a little overview. And maybe as I'm providing the overview, people will be like, oh, I totally see the connection between this and that. But so we have sattva guna, we have rajas, and we have tamas. And so sattva gives us that quality of like that pure, calm, balanced, like clarity, harmony. It's really grounded. And this is essentially what we're striving for within yoga, right? We want to live a more sattvic life. And what a lot of the research has shown is the connection between sattva guna and the ventral vagal safe and social state of the nervous system. So we can say that there's a pretty common connection between sattva and that ventral vagal state. Then we have rajas, which is the quality of action. It's that like stimulation, it's that creation, it's that forward movement, it's that, that creative quality when it's empowered, of course, but when it's like in a disempowered quality, it's very like excess, and it's very seeking outside of itself, and it's very intense. And as you can probably already see, this seems to very much correspond to the sympathetic aspect of our nervous system. And then we have tamas, which is that quality of like inertia, dullness, stillness. And when it's empowered, right, when it's in its more, helpful state, it gives us stability, it gives us groundedness. But when it's not, it keeps us stuck, and it keeps us dull, and it keeps us, immobilized, and we don't want to move, and we don't want to do anything. And so as you can, again, probably tell, this seems to correspond to that more, stuck aspect of our nervous system, which is that dorsal vagal state. And I think the cool thing about, the way that, because I learned Ayurveda and yoga first. So then when I saw, I was like, wait a minute, this connection is like insane. And the cool thing that Ayurveda and yoga talk about is like, rajas and tamas aren't bad. Like they're not like, we want no rajas and tamas, because if we didn't have those things, we would not exist. Mm-hmm. But we want them to be grounded and rooted in sattva, right? We want like that rajasic forward movement that gets us up out of our bed and doing our, our work and going to our practice. Like we need that energy, and we need the energy of tamas grounded in sattva to keep us grounded, right? So we need those two things, but we want them grounded in sattva, or in another way of saying that, we need sympathetic activation grounded in safety. We want some level of like parasympathetic, like calm, rest, and digest, but we want it rooted in safety, right? So I think that's just like a full connection to see as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up the gunas, because I'm always trying to, at least on this podcast, remind people that a lot of what we see nowadays that is emerging as science and discovery, a lot of this is already in yoga. Mm-hmm. And the yogis knew the power of the breath, for example. And while there is so much being said about, just as an example, breath, we've had the whole body of pranayama that's existed for centuries. So moving back to the vagus nerve here, okay, how do we activate, or what are the practices that people who are listening can really pull out of their yoga toolkit and start to regulate their vagus nerve?
Mm-hmm. Such a good question. And my answer to this, and we'll go deeper into each of them, the thing that I find is so cool is like the entire yogic system, like the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga, pretty much all of those limbs seek to regulate the vagus nerve in some way, which is very, very cool. But what we can focus on a little bit more as like actual actionable things that we can do, we can talk about asana, pranayama, and meditation. I'll go a little bit deeper into each of them, because they all just have their unique way of being able to regulate the vagus nerve and to tone the vagus nerve. So I'll start with asana, because that's what many people think of, and many people who listen to this are asana teachers, or maybe practice asana as like maybe their main practice. And again, the kind of interesting thing is that any asana can have a positive effect on the vagus nerve if it is done with a calm breath and a calm mind. And that's ultimately what we want to be focusing on within our asana anyways, if we're just moving and we're not connecting, right? We talked about the polyvagal theory, and the vagus nerve has this quality of neuroception. When we are practicing asana with mindfulness and attention and awareness of the breath and the body, that is by nature supporting and toning the vagus nerve because we're aware of what's happening internally. But to give some like specifics, I definitely feel like forward bend. So if we think of where the vagus nerve is, right, it originates in the brainstem and then it goes down and innervates sort of like our midsection, so down into our digestive system. So any type of forward bends are going to activate the vagus nerve like directly. It's going to kind of move and stuff like that. Back bends are certainly going to activate it and tone it. Again, if we're doing specifically back bends, which can have a very sympathetic quality, like people might notice they feel really rajasic if they do deep back bends. So we want to be careful that we're really using our breath as we do that. And different twists are going to have a really powerful effect on the vagus nerve because, like I said, they access those main areas where the vagus nerve innervates. But in general, like I said, all asana and movement, when done with awareness and focus on our breath, is going to have some level of a positive effect. And something I always think about, and something that could be really helpful for listeners listening, is that in Ayurveda, there's this concept of like increases like and opposites balance. And this is like, if there's like one thing that people would take away from this, because you now understand what the states of the nervous system are, this like key nugget of wisdom from Ayurveda, like increases like and opposites balance, will change the game for you. Because if we can identify the state of our nervous system, we can use asanas, pranayamas, herbs, whatever, of an opposite nature to create balance. So if our nervous system is really sympathetic and we can identify, oh man, I am really sympathetic right now, we can use asanas that are more calming and grounding and slower to create balance and move us into a state of safety. And on the contrary, if our nervous system is in a more like dorsal vagal or like tamasic state, then we're going to want to do things that are more stimulating to the nervous system. We're going to want to bring more movement. We're going to want to push ourselves like a little to just get moving.
Get that little bit of rajasic feeling.
Yes, we want to move through the tamas into the rajas to get to sattva, right? Like that's what I remember like being ingrained to me inside of Ayurveda was like, we can move through the gunas in this way to get to sattva. And it's almost identical to what they outline inside of the polyvagal theory, which is really, really cool as well.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. And I want to share one interesting note about advanced asana, because I'm certainly not someone who thinks like advanced asana is the best. And, I know that a lot of people, want to get advanced asana, and that's certainly not what yoga is about for sure. It's absolutely more about the connection with our breath and our body and that, cultivating that neuroception internally. However, in the context of nervous system regulation, it actually does have a place because once we've created safety in our body, right, and we've got a level of like competency and safety within our asana practice, advanced postures like we talked about, back bends, headstands, handstands, like if you're getting really crazy, maybe like leg behind the head, these more difficult postures can actually serve the purpose of safely challenging the nervous system. And this is actually important because, yes, we want to create safety, but ultimately the nervous system wants to be challenged, right? And we do want to give the nervous system some challenge, and we can use difficult asana to create that little bit of challenge for the nervous system in a safe environment, being super mindful of our breath to calm the nervous system and tone the vagus nerve under like a level of controlled stress.
Nice.
And I think this is super important because like even in life, I mean, we can't stop the difficult things from happening or like the external chaos, but we can cultivate inner resiliency. And so when we start to move into more difficult asana or even difficult pranayama, for example, in a controlled setting, when people are ready and there's first a level of safety, manifested, then we can start to challenge the nervous system with a little bit more intention and purpose. And this can be super, cultivates deeper resiliency, right? Within our body, within our mind, and that, seeks or sort of goes outward into our life and our expression outside off of the mat, so to speak.
No, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I want to go back to one particular pose in question. So I've heard things about you put the blankets under your neck in Sarvangasana. You add that support because you want to support the vagus nerve. is adding, even in restorative yoga, adding that cushion or that blanket under the back of your neck, the base of your head and your upper shoulders, does that support actually help the vagus nerve kind of soothe us a little more, or is that not relevant?
That's such a good question. And I think my answer would be, I think it totally depends on the individual, right? Because we all have, even though like we have like the same anatomy-ish, the specific positioning of, a nerve in the body, it's going to be slightly different in each person. So I think it would be individual. I think that a rule of thumb that I always use is like, if something is causing like pain or discomfort, we definitely want to like use a prop, adjust, etc. But if there's not a lot of pain, if there's not a lot of strain, if it feels comfortable, if we can breathe deeply through it and it doesn't feel like it's pinching anything, I think it would be totally fine to not necessarily use it. But I always think like, for me, there's something so regulating about using props and just like having something support me. There's maybe it's subconscious, maybe
Absolutely.
It's legit, but yeah, there's something that is really soothing about feeling held and feeling supported. And so maybe on like even a psychological level, to accept like support, from a prop even.
Yeah, which is hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's hard for a lot of people. So I think that could totally be regulating. But I do think it's probably pretty individual for sure.
Okay. No, because I sort of heard this somewhere in one class so long ago, but I only heard fragments of it. So I'm just wondering. So yes, you gave us clarity about asana. What about breath and pranayama?
Yes, pranayama. And I'm sure you know lots about this because I know that you do like a pranayama teacher training as well. And again, very similarly to asana, each pranayama is going to have a different effect on our nervous system and our energetic system. And kind of going back to what we said before, like people often feel this need to like do more is better. I'm going to do this fancy pranayama, like and do all these holds and these crazy things. And actually, like just basic on a fundamental level, most of us are breathing just on a day-to-day basis. We're all breathing probably too shallow. We're probably not very conscious of our breath all the time. So even just like basic, slow, calm, mindful breathing is like a soothing balm for the nervous system that brings us into a state of greater safety, right? And just in general, the interesting thing about pranayama and just, breath practices is, like I said, the vagus nerve innervates the diaphragm. And so when we're taking deep breaths and that diaphragm is moving, the more that it moves, the more it stimulates the vagus nerve, calming the nervous system, sending signals of safety to the brain, like, all right, we are breathing deeply, we are safe. We are breathing deeply, we are safe. When we breathe shallow, we send signals of like threat and danger to the brain and the nervous system. And the brain thinks, oh my God, there's this threat happening. So even just like the absolute fundamental, basic, deep, mindful breathing can be super helpful. But just like I said with, asana, we can consider the state of our nervous system and using that same principle of like increases like and opposites balance, we can be like, cool, where's my nervous system right now? And then let's do something opposite of that to create a level of balance. So if we're more sympathetic, we're more rajasic, let's do something more calming. And again, this could be like basic diaphragmatic breathing. This could be like some calming anulom vilom. I would not be doing like retentions. Like you don't even need to think about that until later. Just regulate your breathing, get that diaphragm moving up and down. Even like Chandra Vedana can be really soothing for the nervous system. There's some research. I mean, the actual science-based research is sort of like not 100% on this, but there is a lot of research that's showing that left nostril breathing can actually activate the parasympathetic aspect of the nervous system, which is very cool because, as you said, Ayurveda and yoga have known this for thousands of years, which is very, very exciting. And one of my absolute favorite pranayams actually for stimulating the vagus nerve is Brahmari pranayama for so many reasons. But I feel like this is a good pranayama for both, whether we're in that more sort of stuck dorsal vagal, tamasic state or the more rajasic state. But we get a lot of support from and a lot of activation of the vagal nerve, not only through like, of course, the deep breathing in the diaphragm. For those who are not familiar with Brahmari pranayama, it's like I think call it the bee's breath pranayama.
It's the humming bee or the buzzing bee.
Yes, the humming bee or the buzzing bee pranayama, where you get into your, seated position, you would close your eyes gently, close your ears with your hands, you take a deep breath in and you hum on the way out. And this is so beautiful for the nervous system because, of course, like I said, we're getting that, innervation and the stimulation from the diaphragm. But also when we exhale and we hum, And we use our voice. Like I said, the vagus nerve innervates and stimulates, through our throat and through our larynx and through, when we speak or when we sing or when we chant. So we're also calming and activating the vagus nerve that way. And then I think just generally like closing your eyes and closing your ears, you're like shutting down all that external stimulus and you're just going inward. For me, it's like I could do just like 10 breaths and feel like I just had an
changes.
It changes the game. It's amazing. So that's definitely one of my favorite pranayams that way. And then, of course, like I said, if we are looking at more of a tamasic, sort of, dorsal vagal state, we might want to do something a bit more stimulating, like Kapalabhati or Bhastrika or something that's just going to kind of get us a little bit more.
Wakes you up a little more.
Wakes you up a little, yeah.
I always, when I try to explain breath to a regular asana class, I always tell them, just remember, steady, slow breath, steady mind. Shallow, rapid breathing, restless mind. And if you learn one thing about your breath, it is that you have to breathe deep and slow. And you don't have to do this 24 hours a day. You just need to drop into it every now and then. And especially when you feel overstimulated, like things are spinning out of control. And if you know that, that's enough pranayama for a lifetime.
Yes.
And so I'm glad you mentioned this. And I always tell people, like, notice after you breathe like that, 10 deep, slow breaths, just connect your experience, your attention, your awareness to that shift in your nervous system. Like you can experience it and make that a memory. So you can come back to it and you can always be like, okay, this helped me. Because sometimes we do it and we're not even fully present and we forget about it. Anyway, this is me going off on a tangent.
I love it. I love the tangent.
So I can talk about.
I love it.
I can talk about breath and how people breathe and don't breathe for a very long time. So we spoke about asana. You gave us a lot about pranayama, deep, slow breathing, Brahmari, and if you need to be stimulated or not, you gave us a couple of options. So is there anything else? Should we look at Ayurveda? Is there anything else? I think you mentioned meditation.
Yes.
In a previous response.
Yeah. Yes, I would love to. Yeah, I would love to share a little bit about meditation because I think that when people think meditation, they kind of think it's like this one thing. Like they think like seated, eyes closed, meditating. And yes, that's certainly one way to meditate. And that can be really helpful maybe for someone who is, again, a bit more rajasic and they need to kind of calm and maybe sit and practice being in stillness, which as we know can be really hard for people. However, something I would want to mention here for again, people who are teachers or people who are trying to meditate and they can't sit still. And they're like, what is wrong with me? I just can't sit here. For some people, we have been in a chronic, sympathetic, rajasic state for so long, it literally does not feel safe. We've gotten to a point where it doesn't feel safe to be still. We don't know how to be still because our nervous system feels safest with what it knows best, even if what it knows best is not quote unquote good for you. So even if we know that like chronic stress isn't good for us, if we've been living in that chronic state, that is what feels safe to our nervous system. So if you are someone who struggles to sit still and meditate, there's nothing wrong with you. Your nervous system is probably in a chronic sympathetic state, and that's okay. All we need to do is like, number one, become aware of it. Bring your awareness to like, oh man, it's really hard for me to, sit here and meditate. We can slowly work toward that. And so even like we can use, and we should be using ideally, asana as a form of meditation, like a moving meditation.
Yes.
We can do like a walking meditation where we're mindfully walking and we're focusing on our breath and we're focusing on, a particular object of our concentration, and then ease ourselves into a seated posture. So for those who struggle to sort of sit still, and for those who have an abundance of tamas and they're trying to get unstuck, I would actually say like a walking meditation, asana, like moving might be actually what's best for them as well. Because if you're going to sit there, you might just fall asleep, and that's not meditation. We want to be focused on something, right? So sometimes we need like a little stimulation to sort of get focused. So I think that's so important to know for teachers as well, right? To allow your students that space. Like if it doesn't feel safe for them to sit still, the other thing they could do is like, if you're seated and you want to be seated, but you kind of feel like you need to move, you could just like sway a little back and forth, kind of gently rotate your body, like move your, something that kind of it brings in a little bit of movement, but there is still that focus and that stability there as well. But I think it's just important to know that you have options. You don't just have to like sit there. You can be moving as well. That's still totally meditation.
There's something you just said in passing, which I want to very briefly pause on. You said there are options, right? And I think this is such an important thing for yoga teachers to recognize, because I've been in my own mentorship groups and people are like, I want to teach meditation to my students. And these students are literally beginners. And the intention is very pure, is very sincere. It comes from a good place. But I keep telling them that if your students aren't able to sit and they can't even sense their legs with their eyes closed in their own physical body, you got to wait a little more and invest in their asana some more. Invest in things before just sending them into, because you're in a different stage of practice and evolution, right? And we always think that meditation is just sit in one place, eyes closed, and manage your mind. It's not so simple. And I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like it's overlooked. And we as yoga teachers sometimes in our, what I would like to consider very sincere attempt, we end up offering tools to the students that don't always help them because everyone needs to be at a certain stage in their practice for some of these deeper practices like meditation and pranayama.
Yes, totally. I totally agree.
So as we wind down here, I want to ask you about how does age impact this nerve? And are there any you've given us practices already, but when in our lifetime does this nerve become really significant? I know we're born with it and it's our cranial nerve and it helps in functioning, but I'm curious about the impact of aging because I feel like in modern popular yoga, we do not speak about how yoga can really be your best friend when we're aging and how it has all the tools you need literally to age gracefully and live for a lifetime and really thrive for a lifetime.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think that the nerve is important, really, I would say it's equally important probably throughout our entire lifespan, because ultimately, from the moment that we're young, our nervous system is again, it's still consciously or subconsciously rather detecting, am I safe? Am I not safe? So we are forming the foundations of our nervous system from the time that we're young. It's, bringing us through to, our teenagehood, young adulthood, and then older age. And I would say that practices like yoga are so important, as early as we can, so we can start to become aware of our internal functioning. We can become aware of certain patterns within our mind. And when we become aware, then we can start to tackle them. But when we're not aware, there's not really a lot that we can do, right? So the earlier that we can just start slow, gentle yogic practices, whether it's asana, whether it's, pranayama, whatever, the earlier that we can start, I think the better. And then to speak to your point about the aging, I think it's so important for people as we age. We don't necessarily realize that when we age, people think when you reach a certain age, your body slows down. It doesn't actually slow down as much as we're led to believe. We slow down. We stop moving.
So true.
Right? We stop doing, yes, of course there are slow, changes over time, but they're not as stark as we think, like I said. And so I think the more that we can do gentle asana, the more that we can create any level of movement. It doesn't have to be fancy asana. It could literally be chair yoga. It could be moving your wrists, moving your ankles, creating movement in the body. Like I said, the body is always taking an input, processing, creating an output. So any small movement that we do, that is creating a feedback loop to the brain, and the brain is getting stimulated. It's creating an output, creating a stimulus and output, and that pattern that process is going on and on. When we get older, most people just don't move and they sit there, and their brain degenerates at a more rapid rate because they're not moving, they're not challenging their brain. But what we see, so I'll use Vikram's grandfather as an example. He was walking, moving up until the day he died because he was active. He never stopped. He was always doing gentle, asana, and not even what we think of as asana, moving his wrists, doing walking, just moving, right? So the more that we move our body consistently throughout our lifetime, the healthier our brain is going to be, the healthier our nervous system is going to be. We're going to reduce our risk for things like Alzheimer's, dementia. We're going to be overall healthier. I think we just need to recognize that as we get older, of course, the movement's going to change a little, but encouraging people who are aging to move in any way that feels good for them, that feels safe for them. So again, coming back to that safety, what is accessible to this person in front of me? What is accessible? And literally it could be wrist circles and ankle circles, or, just standing up and sitting down, anything that's going to be gentle, I think would be helpful for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, that is so important. And I'm going to go off on a very brief tangent before I wind this down. I think, again, I'm glad you brought up the wrist rolls and the ankle rolls. And when I was studying yoga in India, right, I went to the Bihar School of Yoga. I went to different schools, but one of the schools I went to was the Bihar School of Yoga. And I came from a power vinyasa and Iyengar yoga and just vinyasa background. And I went into Bihar School of Yoga. And for days and weeks on end, we would just sit and roll our ankles and roll our wrists and do a bunch of other these joint maintenance Pavana Muktasana type of series that they would do. And back then I was so naive. I would be like, what is this? This is so easy. I don't need this. Mm-hmm. I can do Pincha Mayurasana instead. But now, as I've been doing this for a while, it is so important to recognize in popular yoga that we've forgotten the evolution of asana as we age. Mm. I know it's not central to our topic here, but just most yoga teachers I meet don't know how to practice if a 90-year-old student walks in or teach a 90-year-old student who walks in. Mm-hmm. More so if they don't know how to use props. And I just want to call out that blind spot for a lot of yoga teachers that when you study asana, you've got to study it for an evolving body, not just for an able body. And because our bodies at some point won't be as able as they are right now. And it's just, I don't know, maybe I'm just very passionate about it, but all things aging is where I'm at.
Yes.
And asana, I think it's really significant for us to focus on at some point. But anyway, my tangent is now over, Mel. So this has been fascinating. Okay. And I've been wanting to learn about this for so long, and you've put everything down in such clarity and each time circled back to yoga and Ayurveda. And that is so precious. Where can people find you?
Yes, totally. So probably the best place to find me would be on Instagram, as most people are. So I'm on Instagram at Yogi Fuel. You can also find me on my website, which is yogifuel.com. And I actually do. I haven't been active on it in a little while, but I do have a podcast called the Yogi Fuel Podcast that will slowly be evolving.
Oh, I didn't know this. Why didn't you tell me this before?
You know what? I haven't been, maybe the last episode was like months and months ago. So it's been like a little inactive, but it's like coming back up. And I definitely have big plans because I know you adore Vikram. Vikram is such a wealth of knowledge. So really having him have more conversations as well on there. So maybe evolving it a little bit into like an embodied Ayurveda and yoga sort of collaborative podcast, so he can share a little bit more of his wisdoms as well.
Oh, wonderful. I would be very excited when that comes back online. And yeah. Thank you so much, Mel. This has been really fascinating. I'm sure the listeners will get so much value from this conversation. And I hope you come back for more. Thank you.
Yes, for sure.
Thanks for listening. As always, you can find everything linked at letstalk.yoga/listen. If you want to be a part of my monthly mentorship community, then make sure you check out my Mindful Yoga Teachers Club. All the links are in the podcast description, and my new pranayama training will be launching soon, so keep your eyes out for those details as well. I'll see you next week with a brand new episode. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.